Perfect. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you all. And thank you so much for making it to the essentially final talk of this series. And today we're going to talk about imposter phenomenon in research environment, definitions and remedies. Before we start, a couple of things. First, if you want to ask me questions, you can either write them on the chat to the whole chat, or you can just write them to me. So I'd be able to read it out anonymously if you don't want to share sort of with the public your name. Also, if you don't have any questions by the end of the talk, but you have them 2 weeks from now, still please drop me an email, read my emails, or drop me a line on LinkedIn. Let's stay in touch. I'll be very happy to answer your questions when they come, even if it's 2 years later. Again, we'll be happy to discuss things by the end of the talk via chat section, or we can also have this camera on thing. So whatever you feel comfortable with, please feel free to use this means of communication. The things we regularly suggest in terms of people who are in crisis, before we go to the essence of the talk, we always want to discuss a couple of things in terms of the crisis. So if someone is in crisis, where can they get help? And I, of course, know that mostly things are local specifics. However, there are more or less international ways of dealing with crises. For example, one thing could be going online. There is a Samaritans.org, a nonprofit organization, and one can get into a helpline there. They not only have calls, but they also have chats in many international languages and many local languages. So they have all the options available because it's volunteer based. So whenever there is volunteers speaking particular language, most likely they will have such a helpline or chat line based on volunteers' work. Of course, it's always important to keep in mind that emergency rooms in hospitals are not only for broken bones, they're also for mental health emergencies. So please make sure that you keep this in mind, that one can always go to emergency room in case of mental health emergency. Finally, local support groups. This is something that's been more and more widely used these days. There are support groups for many issues, and if you think you might benefit from attending meetings, then please check out the local support groups. Importantly, Dragonfly Mental Health is not a healthcare provider organization. This information provided today, it does not qualify it as medical advice and doesn't substitute for speaking to a medical professional. Now, today, I will briefly introduce myself, then we'll skip Dragonfly Mental Health introduction because you've all heard it before. Then we'll go through the basics of imposter phenomenon, and we'll explore the academic roots of imposter phenomenon. We'll also definitely talk about what helps with imposter phenomenon, and then if you'd like, then we'll follow up with the group discussion. Now, myself, I was born in Russia. I went there to medical school, and then I also went to University of Pittsburgh in the USA to work on my MD thesis. I did my PhD in Berlin, and I also did my postdoc in Germany. Then I traveled to Switzerland, and then I'm back to Germany now, working in science communication for a biotech company. And since 2017, I was doing volunteership work for mental health in academia. So locally, in one of the Max Plancks when I was working as a postdoc, and then we co-founded with Wendy and other people Dragonfly in 2019. And I also support scientists with many other ways, like building communities or mentoring scientists. So basically anything to make life of scientists easier and more pleasant. Now, you already know who we are, and that you already know that we do communication, we do education, first of all, very importantly, we educate, then we build communities, and we do the research as well. We have delivered many programs, we know that they're effective, so now we can move towards the imposter phenomenon. Essentially, most of you probably know that imposter phenomenon is also called imposter syndrome. We prefer imposter phenomenon terminology. I'll let you know in the next slide why it is this way. What is important to underline? That it's not a standalone recognized psychiatric disorder. It is known as well as imposter syndrome, fraud syndrome, perceived fraudulence, or imposter experience. Essentially, it describes a high-achieving individual who, despite their objective success, fail to internalize their accomplishment, and they have a persistent self-doubt and fear of being exposed as a fraud or imposter. It was first described by Kleins and Imes in 1978 to be a phenomenon that only women experience. But we, of course, know that that's not true. Their cohort groups really was something we would consider not sufficient these days, so they didn't include people of color, and really didn't answer the question whether this is a personal condition or a natural response to racist and repressive system. Now, today's talk, the one which I'm going to, the aspects which I'm going to discuss with you, they're purely peer-to-peer perspective. So we are not going to discuss systemic issues about imposter phenomenon, or mostly not. This talk is basically from a person who struggles from imposter phenomenon to others who might potentially struggle from it. If you want to read a bit more about systemic issues, there's a paper that is, what, 3-something years old, Stop Women Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. So it's about repressive system, it's about discrimination of women and other like things like racial, ethnic, and gender overall discrimination. So you can read this there. This is our good friend Daria McCashin. He is, I think, professor in one of the universities in Ireland, and he also gave a fantastic talk about imposter phenomenon. And he also suggests that we stop calling it imposter syndrome and start calling it imposter phenomenon. We believe that language matters, because calling it a syndrome gives it unnecessary medicalization. So we don't like it being sort of like a medical term, because it's not a standalone recognized psychiatric disorder. So we don't want it to be medicalized, and maybe like it gives it unnecessary pathological flavor, which we don't think should be there. So that's why we prefer to call it imposter phenomenon. Now, prevalence. Hard to say. There's different publications, of course. By the end of 1990s, there was a study claiming that up to 30% of medical and pharmacy students have imposter phenomenon. In this Gottlieb's study, they claimed from 20 to 60% of physicians and physicians in training struggle from it. And there was a systematic review by Bravata in 2020, and they collected numbers claiming that this imposter phenomenon, or as they call it, syndrome, varied from 9 to 80%, and it largely was dependent on screening tools and cutoff used to assess symptoms, and basically independent on whether on the study and the number. Basically, the vast majority of studies confirm that it's particularly high among historically marginalized groups, and this is very important. It is common among both men and women. We know it now. It's common across a range of age groups, and we know that it's now we know that it's often comorbid with depression and anxiety, and is associated with impaired job performance, job satisfaction, and burnout among various employees of all levels. Again, as I mentioned, there are no published studies evaluated treatments for a standalone imposter phenomenon. So that's why it's really, for example, difficult to talk about symptoms, because it's not a disease. So we will talk during this presentation today, we will talk about the experiences people may find relevant for them if they struggle from this. So the examples of experience, basically, one may have tons of diplomas, and the colleagues validate their professionalism, their esteemed position, they're praised by their supervisors, yet they still don't believe in their merits. They believe that their success is the result of luck, or it just happened by choice, by chance, and it's not due to their talent or qualification or hard work. And they always feel like they're deceiving people, and they fear that they don't genuinely understand the essence of their work. Of course, such feelings, they're connected to the feeling of success. Then the person, even if they have the successful achievement, this achievement, the success, they feel like if this success is scrutinized or criticized, that this person themselves are found to be valid, wrong, or useless. And this is particular valid when we see it in scientists, of course, because when we see some papers criticizing our works, we take it personally and we feel like it's our own essence is being damaged by such feedback. They also sometimes, people with struggling from imposter phenomenon also sometimes believe that their success is the result of accident. So it hasn't been earned and it's not deserved. And they feel like something like, okay, sure, I got into grad school, I'm a PhD student now, but everyone else deserves it. And I'm here just by a mistake. And of course, this thought that I'm here by accident and this follow-up fears of being exposed, they lead to the feeling of shame. And the self-esteem of persons struggling from imposter phenomenon is somewhat unstable. It depends heavily on capability to constantly demonstrate achievements. And then we tend to think something like, I only have the right to be here if I'm achieving something. And of course, we know that science is like super prone to have such feelings and sort of raise these feelings in us. Now, imposter phenomenon facades. So how may the person look like? As we discussed, this person struggles with constant background anxiety that is rooted in fear and shame. Fear of being exposed and shame of being somewhere they don't belong. Now, they believe that everyone else knows how to behave and belong somewhere, but only the person struggles with imposter phenomenon. They don't feel like they belong really. They, however, of course, appear to belong but they feel like it's pretending, maybe not all the time, but sometimes like they still feel like they're pretending that they have the right to be. So, however, during their communication, they're hiding it really well, so they can appear agreeable. So they're smiling, nodding, participating in conversations. But for people struggling from the phenomenon, it may feel like a performance once in a while. And unfortunately, this is the constant background sort of belief. And this belief is that they lack some important knowledge or skill that others have. And if that deficiency is revealed, then something terrible or bad will happen. This constant desire or need, we can say it, to receive confirmation is that something that these people have because they need an external validation that they have the right to be where they are. And sometimes it can turn into even an obsession with external validation, which of course is very dangerous. So even if the person is told that they're doing great, even if their boss is telling them, okay, you're doing great job, what they actually say is not what people hear. And person with imposter phenomenon can hear something like, or think that, okay, they're only saying it because they feel sorry for me. Or they can't really mean that. I bet they're already looking for someone to replace me. Or they only think that because they really haven't figured out that I'm an imposter yet, so they haven't seen through me yet. The problem with that external validation is that despite the fact that it actually relieves some of our imposter feelings, it only does it temporarily and never permanently. And so from some people, let's say their boss told them that they're doing great and they have this, like high up, like emotional raise and they feel great. Most likely in the vast majority of cases, they will feel bad again. It's just a matter of time when. For some people, it's 2 hours. For some people, it's 2 weeks. But essentially, everyone goes back to their background anxiety and feeling like they're not good enough. And that's one of the biggest issues with imposter phenomenon. Now, Of course, imposter phenomenon is connected to perfectionism, and people struggling from imposter phenomenon typically believe that perfection is an attainable goal. So, like, person with a stable self-esteem without imposter phenomenon will think something like, I have good days, I have bad days, but overall I'm okay. The person with imposter phenomenon will feel like, if I'm perfect, then no one will be able to judge me, then I'm safe and no one will be able to see through me. And of course, it's dangerous in terms of the reduction of quality of life. So a person's life is not as enjoyable or full as it could be, neither professionally, and like as scientists, our profession is our life, basically, not personal. So it's really, really important that we take care of these feelings before it ruins our lives. Now, another thing is that people with imposter phenomenon typically request too much from themselves. And in one aspect, this could be about perfectionism when learning. So think about things when you're learning something, especially if you start as a PhD student or a postdoc in your new lab, you need to learn new methods. You expect it from yourself to learn things immediately. You would never expect such thing from your mentee, yet you put such an unreasonable conditions on yourself. So it's really important to remind ourselves that there is a natural learning curve. And that's important to go through the whole curve. And also, another dangerous aspect of this is that sometimes we treat learning new activities or skills as essential thing, and it can turn into damaging perfectionism. For example, one thing is if we want to learn how to write grants. This is very important for us as for scientists. Of course, we need some funding, so it's important to learn how to write grants. However, another approach could be, if I don't write perfect grants, then I'm worthless. It doesn't matter how good I am at other things. And these two aspects, these two different approaches are very important to keep in mind, because that's where we differentiate reasonable learning experiences versus meaningless perfectionism. So please keep it in mind as well. In terms of origin, it's unknown really. So we've talked to many people, psychologists, psychiatrists. We did the research, so there are plenty of theories. So, however, generally you can split them on more or less two. One is that it could be connected to innate personality traits, such as anxiety or neuroticism, or it can be related to childhood experiences that devalues child intrinsic worth, trauma, or some environmental condition. However likely, the origin of imposter phenomenon is connected to modern culture link between productivity and worth. So the more productive you are, the more worth you are. And we know that it's absolutely exacerbated in academia. It's taken to a whole new level of productivity and worth connection. Overall, we probably, it's safe to say that a lot of us live in the society where there is a focus on productivity. So many modern cultural generally place more value on products over experiences, starting from the childhood. For example, a child went to a piano lesson, and one thing is that their parent tell them, you play the piano so well, we will send you to a music school for talented kids, and you will master the skill and become a famous musician. And another thing is that they can tell something like, oh, did you play piano so well? Did you enjoy playing it? Like, do you like to learn more about it? Or, I'd support you choosing doing things you enjoy. So of course, one thing is about more about productivity, another is about experience, and it's really important to distinguish them. Now, moving to academia. Things are, again, questionable because of, as we discussed, cutoff lines are different. In 2020, there was a publication stating that estimating around 20% of students in universities suffer from imposter phenomenon. And in 2021, there was I think a questionnaire, so Chemistry World published a paper stating that up to 95% of women experience moderate or severe imposter phenomenon feelings in their field, in science. And to be honest, this last number based on seem very, very true based on the experiences we have talking to people and delivering this programs globally. So that seemed to be a real number, actually, unfortunately. So based on this data, this scientific world and community seems like everyone feels like everyone seems to know what they're doing, and I'm the only one who doesn't know what's going on. Now, how imposter phenomenon gets its roots in academia. And I don't know, of course, much about your network culture. I grew up in Soviet Union and post-Soviet places where hierarchy plays a huge role. Starting from primary school, there's a very hierarchical settings, and then of course you need to be constantly like looking up to someone, listening to someone, and doing just what you're told. And basically the way you are evaluated is not only by grades themselves, but also by the comparison of these grades between peers. Starting from primary school, there's always a constant comparison of who studies better, who studies worse. If you're studying worse than someone, then they will be told, then you will be told that you should be looking up to them, and so on and so forth. And the other issue is that in school and university, let's say bachelor's and probably master's, we're constantly taught based on the tasks that are designed to be solved. And when we're joining the PhD program, we start to deal with the things that have not yet been solved. And even before that, university program is much more different and much more difficult sometimes than the school program. And so people who were doing really good in school, but they're not doing really that well in the university, or they did really well in the university, but not doing that well during their PhD programs, of course, they feel like they're not supposed to be there. It doesn't mean that they're not supposed to be there. It just means that the settings changed and they just need to adapt. But of course, it causes imposter phenomenon feelings in a lot of us. Another thing is that in the research field overall, in research, there always comparison of achievements. For example, you start as a PhD student and you see, or as a even junior group leader, and you see that there are other group leaders and they have published so many papers in so many fancy journals, and you have not yet. And of course, you'll feel like you're less than. And sometimes we're told this, sometimes our PhD supervisors tell us that all my PhD students need to publish high-profile papers to graduate. Might not even be the requirement by a university, but that we're still told this. And of course, all this comparison is always there. Now, not only the research successes and achievements themselves, but even efforts are compared. And if you already have this background anxiety, thinking that you're not good enough, and you compare yourself to the colleagues that already published or get some fancy results or whatever you think it is, you think like, okay, all my colleagues were harder than me and I'm not as smart, so I need to, double my efforts and work on Saturday and Sunday, and preferentially from Saturday to Sunday as well, just to keep up with them. Sometimes we're told by our supervisors that all my other PhD students work on the weekends. Are you sure that you actually deserve to be here? Are you sure you want to be here? And this is something that also cause us some stress and some self-doubt feelings. Failure is a huge, huge, huge issue. And whenever we deal with failure in an academic path, it's really hard to not have self-doubt. So something may happen in academic past. For example, this happened to me. I thought things were fine, but then I really got a bad review on my, one of the reviewers gave me a very bad mark on my PhD thesis. And I thought that, you know, and I was already working for a couple of months as a postdoc in another lab, and I thought I don't want to, I don't deserve to be here. Like, they clearly they don't see through me. I clearly don't deserve to be here. I cannot even like figure out the situation with my PhD. And so, okay, the defense I managed somehow, but this whole thing that I didn't do good enough hunted me for some years. So this is something we should keep in mind. Failure is going to happen. From large failures and small failures, it's unavoidable. So of course it will make us feel not too well. Financial situation, of course, finance track, financial instability is there for scientists, especially if we compare to the peers who did not choose academic paths, typically people in business, or in some other governmental jobs. Typically, our peers who didn't choose science, they do financially better. And of course, it also makes us feel that we chose some wrong path and that it's not really worth it. Sometimes our family tell us something like, oh, you know, your former classmate already bought a house and you're only like, you know, you're still doing your PhD, you're already 34 or something like this. So of course, it is not helpful. So we have to keep it in mind that this is one of the things that make us doubt ourselves. Another thing is that sometimes we give too much credit to others and not enough to ourselves. Sometimes is also provided by other people, such a feedback. So if you are prone to say something like, you know, nothing I did would have been possible without the constant support of my postdoc, maybe you should try to reevaluate and think about your wins and your achievements, because it's not true. These are your achievements, and postdocs are there as well as other mentors and teachers to teach us, but it doesn't mean that you're really worth it without them. Overall, of course, what people say impacts how we think, and you know, if we're told 30 times that a properly trained monkey could do a PhD, or something like, oh, is that really all you've done since our last meeting? Then of course, at a certain point, we will start thinking this about ourselves and maybe even translate this wrongful message to others. So please be mindful about what you're saying. It's really important that, you know, this chain of such behavior stops with us when we notice it. Now, another thing which we have really touched briefly on, which is, again, I think is important to underline, is that failure in our academic path is inevitable. The whole point of academic life is experimental life, right? And so our theories might lead us somewhere which we cannot prove eventually. And it will happen. Experiments will fail. In fact, the vast majority, most of them will fail. And this is fine. This is normal. This is the essence of science. So we need to look at it from a different perspective, because if we beat ourselves up for each and every failure we have, especially for the ones which are part of the job, then we'll never have a solid foundation and self-esteem, and then we'll always evaluate ourselves only through achievements, and this is not going to help us because experiments will fail. So in academia, failure is pretty much part of the job, and we have to be aware of it. And it is how it is. We have to learn how to live with it and be stable. Now further, of course, imposter phenomenon impacts diversity in universities. You probably went through this slide before during the previous talks. We do know that there are marginalized groups in academia. And we do know that people from marginalized groups are dropping out of academia more often. So this imposter phenomenon can explain some parts of this higher dropout rate among marginalized groups in academia. So there's a paper if you want to read about it. And of course, being a member of one of this group is already difficult enough to deal with in academia, but being a member of several of these groups, of course, is adding up. This is called intersectionality. And there are a bunch of publications starting from maybe beginning of 2020s. If you want to read about it, you can read about it. There are things one can check up. So I imagine that you went through this impact of microaggressions during the previous slides many times. So we can just shorten it down and once again go through these groups, just say that they're women, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQ plus IA, first generation scientists, folks with disabilities, and international scientists are members of marginalized groups, and they have it more difficult than others. Here are a bunch of intersectionality papers. This is 2023. Another one is also 2023. So, and this one is from 2022. So if you want, you can have a look. They're pretty, all of them pretty interesting. Now, luckily, things are not as bad, so there is help. And this is something that I know we've been probably developing ourselves in terms of imposter phenomenon feelings. We've been brewing with them, let's put it this way, for some years. Our environment in academia also is kind of imposing it on us. So obviously there's no really there's no illusion that after one lecture everyone will be healed, but there are definitely things that can help. There are two major things. One are short-term, others are long-term. So let's start from something that is more solid and more long-term is something that starts with awareness and acceptance. So first of all, we need to notice it and accept it. And when we have the self-doubt feelings, try to really figure out whether it's you talking or imposter phenomenon feelings are talking. Fighting it with the sheer force of will is usually not helpful because we cannot really prevent ourselves from thinking this way or feeling this way. So as soon as we start to reinforce such as a feeling as we're not strong enough or not good enough, that we cannot stop thinking this way, most likely it will cause more and more of these feelings. So it's really not helpful. It's a vicious circle. It's like this not really helpful feedback like loop. So in terms of long-term suggestion, then psychotherapy is definitely recommended. And I know that in some places it's more stigmatized than in others. However, again, there are some support groups, there are some resources online. So I recommend that if you don't have a direct access to it, then try to check out the support online. There may be some things, and people globally use online tools and online psychotherapy that helps. Again, try not to turn it into meaningless perfectionism. It's not about learning something, it's about really making your way into enjoying life and enjoying scientific process and accepting and healing rather than just to learn some skill and move on. Now, essentially what this therapy probably contain is this kind of approaches. They teach people how to identify their own feelings, really where this come from and what is like logical, what is the logical interpretation of them. So with the therapy, people typically learn how to recognize their own emotions when they come. They evaluate the real needs, maybe some insecurities behind these emotions, and they learn how to identify and deal with these needs. Of course, this takes long time. It's not always available. So there are some short-term things that help. And first thing, for me at least, was the connection to community. Community helps. Now we know, I hope I convinced you that the vast majority of people in science, especially from marginalized groups, feel the same way. So almost everyone has this imposter phenomenon feelings. And for example, for me, what helped was to talk about this to people who I believe are the greatest scientists on earth. you know, so I talked to them and they said, no, but we actually feel the same way, and everyone brings something to the table. So being open about it really helps to destigmatize it. Again, I'm not saying that you should go to your boss and say, hey, you know what, I think I don't belong here, but try to talk to people whom you trust, who care about you. So I think this is really, really important, and it actually helps to sort of like deal with such an anxiety that you don't belong. Something that we also recommend is try to employ the principle of sufficiency. And this is not something which science loves, because science believes that we should be perfect and the best of the best of the best. But I think it's important to remind ourselves that scientific process is mostly routine. And in this routine, you just should be good enough. And so this principle of sufficiency is opposite to principle of duality, and try to cultivate this feeling of sufficiency of I'm good enough, that may reduce imposter feelings over time. Something like, I'm good enough to do my job. Some skills I'm good at, some skills I'm not good at, just like everyone else. This thought is typically very, very helpful. This, of course, must be promoted by the team leads, especially if we're talking about interdisciplinary teams. We all bring something different to the team, different point of views, different background, different experience, different thinking process. If we're all experts in the same tiny field, then there is no added value. And so I like to compare this kind of approach with the Christmas party, or another party where it's potluck party, basically, where everyone brings something to brunch or evening. And so if everyone brings the same dish, it's kind of a lousy party. So these parties are really great because everyone brings something different. And so this is, I believe, something that should be promoted by the team leads. So summary of what helps. I hope we have learned today the signs and symptoms, experiences. I hope I convinced you that you're not alone. I also suggest that you remind yourself that you earned your position wherever you are. You did really a lot of effort, you put a lot of effort, you did hard work, you earned where you are, the position where you are at. Try to stop comparing your work with others. If you want to compare yourself to someone, compare your current one to your past self. And this is something that will show you that you have achieved so much already, and you moved on to so much further compared to where you've been. So this is something that is recommended. Try to learn how to accept congratulations on your achievements. We're, as scientists, not really good at that. Try to replace perfectionism with sufficiency. Try to learn how to be kind to yourself. Treat yourself like a mentee you would mentor once in a while. Try to track your success, small things day by day. By the end of the year, you'll have many, many things done and crossed off your list. Try to talk to your PI or mentor about how common failure is. And this is something which we also try to remind people, especially coming from very strict hierarchies, hierarchy organization, and places that your PI and your mentor can be actually different people. There are plenty of mentorship programs where you can meet people online, when they're all like volunteer based, when you can find some people to mentor you, not necessarily about science, about what your next career step could be, or how to get into a PhD program that you like, or how to get into a group leader position somewhere else. And because our PIs, as great as they could be, everyone has limited perspective, as well as our PIs. So your PI and your mentor can be different people. Please keep this in mind. And try therapy, psychotherapy, if this is something that you find acceptable, maybe, and try to investigate whether anxiety or depression may be playing a role. I think that's it. As a final slide, we always like to say that try to treat scientists as elite sports people. So when elite training and sport person get the injury, even small injury on court, they get help right away, without any judgment, without any stigmatization. So we hope that eventually scientists will have the same approach for their mind, because our mind is our most valuable asset, professionally speaking. So we hope that in case of injuries, even if they're small ones, we'll be able to get help without any stigmatization, without any judgment whatsoever. Now, it's discussion time. You can fill out the survey if you want to give us a feedback so we can improve this talk. But I'm basically here. We still have time. So if you want to ask questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If you feel uncomfortable, or if you don't have any questions, or if you come up with a question 2 weeks from now or 2 years from now, just drop me a line in my email or in social media. I'm everywhere, so I'll be very happy to answer your questions. Now I think we can stop recording. I'll also stop sharing my screen.